Say my name, say my name.
We learned this week that nominative determinism is just not a thing.
I can't wait to see where this goes.
Okay. Tell me more.
Let's see where this goes.
Since you asked, nominative determinism is the idea that a person's name is to some extent their destiny, that what a person is called kind of dictates who and what that person becomes, perhaps even to the extent of guiding their future career direction. Interestingly, the concept was first described by nominative determinism.
That's not my name. That's not my name. That's not my name. That's not my name.
We learned, however, that nominative determinism is hooey, bunkum, and indeed balderdash, and we learned this, if little else, when we learned of the existence of this modern American conservative philosopher.
You know, the hardest person to be right now in America is white males, right?
Is it, though?
Let's go back to just seeing each other the way the founders decided we should see each other, as equal.
The same founders, presumably, who specified in the original text of the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution that enslaved black people counted for the purposes of allocating each state's congressional representation and tax bill as just 3/5 of any other citizen. We learned, not for the first time and not in the first country, that those who most loudly declare themselves patriots tend to possess the least actual knowledge of the country whose virtues they are noisily extolling, a proposition with which I am sure the General Muttered Agreement crew will concur. Anyway, we learned that this sage was the president and founder of Christians Engaged, whose general proclivities may be gleaned from their name, and good luck to them. But to return to our setup about nominative determinism, which to be honest is starting to feel a bit laboured, but we've come this far, we learned that her given name has turned out to be very much not congruent with a career as a hectoring evangelist, indeed arguably quite the opposite, being as it genuinely actually is Bunny Pounds. It's Bunny with an I as well. Anyway, elsewhere amid the ongoing efforts to make America great again, we learned that if anything will atone for a 7% slide in stock markets occasioned by a pointless trade war waged at least in part against blameless penguins, it is apparently flagpoles.
We're putting up a beautiful, almost 100-foot tall American flag on this side and another one on the other side, 2 flags, top of the line, and they've needed flagpoles for 200 years. It was something I've often said, you know, they don't have a flagpole per se.
Yes. Come on, let's have a sound effect of flags flapping as if from 100-foot poles planted either side of the White House. We learned, therefore, that US President Donald Trump has lived in the White House slightly more than 4 years, or slightly more than 4 weeks if you discount the golf excursions, without noticing that the building has what appears to the admittedly inexpert eye like a perfectly serviceable flagpole right on top of it already, but we learned that President Trump proposes to pay for the 2 further flagpoles out of his own pocket. And when has Donald Trump ever said he was going to pay for something and then didn't? Answer us that.
And on the subject of Trump yesterday, USA Today published an exclusive investigation that they say shows that various Trump organizations have a history of not paying small businesses and individuals in full for their services.
We learned, therefore, that whichever DC area flagpole installers intend to bid for the gig should probably ask for cash up front. But we learned that this was not the only vital public works being undertaken by Trump's administration. We learned of the latest important advance in the crusade of US Secretary of Defense as of this recording, Pete Hegseth, to strip the US military of its modern, effete, wokest, tiptoeing through the tulips tendencies.
No more pronouns, no more excuses, no more quotas, no more woke bullshit.
and return it to being the kind of skull-crushing, blood-drinking death machine of which General George S. Patton himself would have been proud.
Now, there's a green room adjacent to the press briefing room that used to have a table in the middle with some chairs around it where officials would study their notes before they would go out and brief reporters. So what Secretary Hegseth did was he asked for it to be modified into more of a makeup studio.
However, we learned, and greatly to our regret, as Hegseth is pretty much writing these for us at this point, that he might be well advised to make the most of his taxpayer-funded foundation blusher and eyeshadow while he can, as we learned that Hegseth may have delighted us long enough.
We are following a developing story out of the White House where, according to NPR, the White House has now begun the process of looking for a new Secretary of Defense.
At which point it feels necessary to insert the familiar disclaimer that this is all more or less current as of this recording. If Hegseth has, by the time you hear this, been sacked and replaced by Hulk Hogan, Kid Rock, Bunny Pounds, a 100-foot flagpole, a heron, or who or whatever, we hope you appreciate that we do our best to keep up.
I think so.
Your support means a great deal in these trying times. We learned that vultures had commenced hovering after it turned out that Secretary Hegseth had copied in another bunch of non-essential personnel, among them his wife and brother, on the details of imminent military operations. But we learned that in keeping with the warrior ethos he is determined to inculcate, he was striking a defiant and above all sober tone in laying down a firm and above all sober line on what compromises he is simply not prepared to make.
And get along to go along. And, start doing Meet the Press and go into the Council on Foreign Relations and spending time with all the new cocktail sipping crowd. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because President Trump asked me to bring warfighting back to the Pentagon every single day. That is our focus.
Our lawyers inform us that we are permitted to describe his demeanour as energetic, vigorous, and if we fancy pushing our luck, animated. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Mueller.